Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 74th episode of A Treatise on Cosmic Fire. We kicked off our last session with a discussion of the three synthesizing planets, which are Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn, which is the point he's really making is how the lesser four are always drawn up into the higher three. And he was giving this example in terms of the synthesizing planets of how the lower quaternary of the solar logos, which is represented by four planets, which he doesn't tell us which they are drawn up into the higher three. We do know that those three planets are Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn. It's just one example of how the lower four rays are drawn up into the higher three. The lower four aspects are drawn up into the higher three aspects. The position of the higher three Sephiroth, for instance, in relation to the lower seven, illustrates the same phenomena, as does the upward merging of seven chakras into three. We then took a look at how the rays of attribute, which enable four specific ways that intelligence is developed while one is gathering experience, while one is primarily in relation with one's environment. Then the human being uses the four rays of attribute. But they, at a certain point in one's upward journey, they are eventually synthesized into the third ray. We then took a look at the Ouroboros, which represents both the unity of the one life, and is also a symbol of cyclic manifestation, where all outer phenomenon returns to its source, represented by the head. DK then describes how the polar magnetic opposition between planets eventually leads to synthesis, applying the principle to the solar logoic lower quaternary. Through this fusion of the lower four, we have the final consummation of the solar evolution, the solar logos, the SON, achieving perfected love, really perfected love, wisdom, and uniting with his cosmic opposite. And DK doesn't tell us who that is. Might be Sirius, but it's never we're never told exactly who that cosmic opposite is. At this point, all the logos' planetary schemes and rays are blended into one harmonious whole. For the solar logos, now an embodiment of the second aspect, has brought forth perfected love wisdom through the medium of matter. That's the whole point of his incarnation, to demonstrate perfected love wisdom, so that the indweller, the SON, has completely permeated the matter aspect with that quality of his own intrinsic self, the Christ principle. So in this, at the very end of this particular solar logoic manifestation, incarnation, the solar logos will shine forth as a fully radiant expression of the Christ principle on a cosmic scale. That's that key point where then one transcends into the next level. It's represented by a cosmic initiation. Once in a while, DK gives us a super occult, often enigmatic statement. There's been a half a dozen so far in TCF with no further explanation. And we got one of these statements last time. Quote, a hint as to the identity of our solar logos' polar opposite lies concealed in the relationship of the Pleiades to our Earth. But not until a further precession of the equinoxes will it be more fully seen what is the exact relationship involved. Totally enigmatic, right? He's been talking about the solar logos' polar opposite, right? Some great solar being, right? Another logos. So my question is, since we're trying to determine the identity of our solar system's polar opposite, why does DK tie the hint of that identity to the Pleiades' relationship to the Earth rather than the Pleiades' relationship to the solar logos? No further clues are given. Next, we began a consideration of the third of DK's 9 introductory questions. Why is this solar system evolving along the lines of duality? So before I get into this, we have a couple of questions here. First of all, let's see here. We had a question from, before Tia's question, who was it that raised their hand? I caught it out of the corner of my eye. Did you catch that? I think they lowered their hand.
Yeah,
Who was that?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
Or at least I don't know. So,
No, it was Cicely. Cicely, do you still have your
Cecily,
question?
she's all set. No question. So, Tia,
Okay. Well, I'm sorry, Cicely, if I ran over your question, but if you still would like to ask it, just raise your hand again. Go ahead, Tia. Tia?
Well,
you
now I can
can't?
unmute. It said that I could not unmute because it was disabled by the host. No, I was just asking
Oh,
since
we should,
It's
can we
not.
set it so that,
It's not disabled. Everybody can unmute.
okay,
uh,
good, good. That's the thing. All right, go ahead, Tia.
I just had a question. If we're talking about the relationship of the solar logos to its polar opposite,
Right,
clearly we're not talking about a planet because normally
right.
when the Earth is polar opposite, we think of Venus, and that's a sacred planet. But since we're talking about a constellation and one that holds, is that the second ray of cosmic energy, the Pleiades?
Well, the Pleiades represents the third aspect.
Yeah,
And
that's what I
so,
thought. Third
and
aspect.
we're
So,
the third aspect non-sacred planet. So there's the link. But
right.
what in the world does that have to do with the polar opposite of
And
the,
that means it would suggest that we're talking about a level of cosmology that has not been revealed to us yet.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's in fact true, including the identity of that polar opposite of the solar logos, you know. Uh, I mean, there's a lot of talk about the Pleiades being the alter ego of the solar system, but that doesn't in and of itself make it the solar logos's polar opposite with which it will blend at the end of this solar logoic manifestation. Okay, thanks, Tia. Anyone else? Yeah, I invite you to, you know, ask questions and make comments anytime that you have them. Okay, let's see, where are we here? Okay, yeah, so let me get rid of this window. Um, yeah, then we begin a consideration of this, of the third of TK's 9 introductory questions. here we go. Why is the solar system evolving along the lines of duality? The K then tells us that this question has been explored by religions, scientists, philosophers, biologists, and mathematicians. So that pretty much takes us up to where we left off last time. For this session, we'll back up to the beginning of this inquiry. Let's have a reader for this, please.
And Veronica, you want to read?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Why is the solar system evolving along the lines of duality? 1. The problem of existence. The third question involves one of the most difficult problems in metaphysics and covers in its consideration the whole perplexing mystery of the reason why there is objectivity at all. It is one that has been asked under different forms by men of every school of thought, by religious people who inquire, why did God create it all? Why is existence forced upon one and all? By scientists in the search for the ultimate truth and in their endeavor to find out the motivation of all that is seen and to account for sensuous life, by philosophers in their equally diligent search for the animating subjectivity that is expressing itself through all the moral and ethical sciences in every civilization and among every people.
Thank you, Anne Veronica.
Thank you.
Okay. So first, this is the first subsection of this question. The third question involves one of the most difficult problems of metaphysics and covers in its consideration the whole perplexing mystery of the reason why there is objectivity at all. So with this question, we'll be considering why the solar system manifests as a series of opposites: subject and object, life and form, spirit and matter, instead of remaining unified and thus unmanifest. Next. It is one that has been asked under different forms by men of every school of thought, by religious people who inquire, why did God create it all? Why is existence forced upon one and all? So, from a religious point of view, we might ask, if God is perfect, why would he deem it necessary to create an imperfect world? And why should all beings be compelled to participate in existence with its suffering, limitation, and struggle? At this point, we're not looking for answers, just the great question as it has been framed through many disciplines. Next, by scientists in their search for the ultimate truth and in their endeavor to find out the motivation of all that is seen and to account for sensuous life. Sensuous here meaning through the senses. It should be really sensory life. Scientists probe for underlying laws, constants, and principles that explain why the universe behaves as it does. Beyond those mechanics, science implicitly seeks causation and purpose. Even when couched in materialistic terms, the drive is to uncover what motivates or drives phenomena, whether that be energy, force, or some deeper unifying principle. Next, by philosophers in their equally diligent search for that animating subjectivity that is expressing itself through all the moral and ethical sciences in every civilization and among every people. So the philosophical query is, what motivates phenomena? What is the animating subjectivity, the inner principle of consciousness that expresses itself through moral, ethical, and cultural life across all civilizations? In spiritual philosophy, we look for the ontology of cause and effect. Yes, Barbara. Barbara, are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
So the one view is that the absolute is alive and radiant, and in that radiance throws off rays. And from those rays, geometries can form. Um, and from there, layers of the whole of reality. So, what we're trying to do is within our own frameworks and worldviews, um, trying to give a meaning that will work within that framework. But it may be just an intellectual exercise because uh, the absolute may be just an aliveness, and out of that aliveness, there is an outpouring that may be beyond meaning.
Yeah, your description, resonates with how I understand these initial causes, as described in the uh, stanzas of Zahn, the first stanza in TCF, and the first three stanzas, in the Secret Doctrine, are pretty much describe what you just described. Um, what's not part of that is why? Why does it do it at all? And that's the question that's being asked here. Why does the absolute reflect itself into manifestation, through the first and second logos, who then combine to create the third logos, and then all that you just described through the dropping of the one ray and the uh, uh, light of consciousness then coming into being, right? Um, but the why is missing in all of that description, which is what DK is embracing here. So at this point, DK is just framing the question. He gets into the answer uh, at the next step. Anyone else? Okay. So, okay, so next up, could we get a reader, please?
Barbara, you want to read?
Yes. By the biologist in his persistent application to search for the discovery of the source of life and his strenuous endeavor to account for the principle of life that is seen ever to evade his investigations. By the mathematician who, dealing with the form side of manifestation in all the grades of mathematics, decides that God geometrizes, that law and rule pervade universally, that the one exists by means of the many, and who yet is unable to solve the problem as to who that geometrizing identity may be. So the problems persist in all the many lines of approach, in the endeavor to find the solution, and in the cul-de-sac of hypothesis, and in the recognition of an ultimate something of such an elusive nature that men are forced seemingly to predicate a source of energy, of life, of intelligence, and to call it by diverse names according to the trend, religious, scientific, or philosophical, of their minds.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, so TK continues his exploration of the questions, why did God create it all? Why is existence forced upon one and all? By the biologist, in his persistent application to search for the discovery of the source of life, and in his strenuous endeavor to account for the principle of life that has seemed ever to evade his investigations. So let's take a look at each of these phrases. First, persistent application to search for the discovery of the source of life. Biologists have always engaged in a deep study of cells, molecules, and evolutionary processes, hoping to find the ultimate origin of life. At least a certain group of biologists have engaged in this ultimate origin of life. Yet despite advances, the source, the spark that makes matter alive, remains undiscovered. Next, his strenuous endeavor to account for the principle of life. So beyond mechanisms like DNA, which carries genetic instructions, and proteins, which both build the body's architecture and drives its chemistry, there is the deeper question, what is life itself? What is the principle that distinguishes a living organism from so-called inert matter? And finally, that is seen ever to invade his investigations. No matter how far biology advances, the essence of life, the essence, slips through the net of material analysis. Life can be described, dissected, and modeled, but its animating principle is not reducible to chemistry alone. Next, by the mathematician who, dealing with the form side of manifestation in all the grades of mathematics, decides that God geometrizes, that life and rule pervade universally, that the one exists by means of the many, and who yet is unable to solve the problem as to who that geometrizing identity may be. So again, we will go phrase by phrase. First, by the mathematician who, dealing with the form side of manifestation in all the grades of mathematics. So mathematics is concerned with the measurable aspects of reality, of physical plane reality, primarily through the study of form, structure, and relation by means of its many and varied disciplines. Next, decides that God geometrizes, symbolically meaning that the universe is not chaotic, but ordered, patterned, and harmonious. The phrase God geometrizes was used by Plutarch to describe Plato's Timaeus, in which Plato presents a universe ordered by a divine craftsman or demiurge using mathematical harmonies and geometric forms. This is also the theosophical view through the Dhyani Chohans, who you could say literally geometrize in their process of creating the outer forms. Next, that law and rule pervade universally, meaning that order, proportion, and certain governing laws and principles, such as the law of attraction and repulsion, are present everywhere in the cosmos, from the smallest atom to the largest galaxy. Next, that the one exists by means of the many, meaning that unity is revealed through multiplicity, that the one reality manifests itself by differentiating into countless forms, and that these many forms are the vehicle through which the one allows itself to be known. The one, as here used, is not an abstract isolation, but God immanent, living presence expressed through manifestation. And finally, and who yet is unable to solve the problem as to who that geometrizing identity may be. So, though the mathematician perceives universal order and concludes that, quote, God or causal agencies geometrize, he cannot penetrate to the identity of the geometer, the conscious being or logos behind the mathematical harmony of the cosmos. This signals the limit of mathematics as a discipline and highlights the boundary between form, which mathematics masters, and the subjective realms. So this concludes DK's listing of those who ask the question, why did God create it all? Why is existence forced upon one and all? So the next passage says, so the problem persists in all the many lines of approach in the endeavor to find the solution, end in the cul-de-sac of hypothesis, and in the recognition of an ultimate something of such an elusive nature that men are forced to seemingly to predicate a source of energy, of life, of intelligence, and to call it by diverse names according to the trend, religious, scientific, or philosophical, of their minds. So despite centuries of inquiry, the fundamental questions, why existence? What is life? Persist. All the many lines of approach include religious, science, philosophical, biological, and mathematical disciplines, which all hypothesize their own conclusions on the source of existence. The scientist speaks of it as energy, the biologist as life, and the philosopher and metaphysician as a form of transcendent intelligence. Each description captures only one facet, yet all are partial reflections of a single underlying reality that actually transcends all these descriptions. Okay, thoughts or questions on anything so far? Feel free to speak up whenever you'd like. Okay, next up, could we get a reader, please?
Carol, do you want to read?
Okay. God, the universal mind, energy, force, the absolute, the unknown. These terms and many others are forced from the lips of those who, by means of the form side, seek the dweller within the form, and cannot find him as yet. This failure to find him is due to the limitations of the physical brain, and to the lack of development in the mechanism whereby the spiritual may be known and whereby he may and eventually will be contacted. The problem of duality is the problem of existence itself and cannot be solved by the man who refuses to recognize the possibility of two occult facts. One, that this entire solar system embodies the consciousness of an entity who originates on planes entirely without the solar ring pass knot.
Thank you. Okay, first, God, the universal mind, energy, force, the absolute, the unknown. These terms and many others are forced from the lips of those who, by means of the form side, seek the dweller within the form. and cannot find him as yet. So when people investigate reality only through the form side, the measurable, structural, external aspects, the source, which they call God, universal mind, etc., by definition, inevitably remains hidden. Next, this failure to find him is due to the limitations of the physical brain. So now we get down to it. And to the lack of development in the mechanism whereby the spiritual may be known, and whereby he may and eventually will be contacted. The brain is the instrument of consciousness on the physical plane. At our current fifth root race stage of development, the brain is not yet refined enough to register the subtler impressions of soul and spirit. The quote, lack of development in the mechanism whereby the spiritual may be known refers to centers of force in the etheric body, as well as their glandular counterparts, including the pineal gland, the pituitary body, and alta major centers, which are embryonic. Activity is embryonic in most people. Nonetheless, the phrase eventually will be contacted confirms that through evolution, the brain and these many centers will eventually bring the subtle energies of the soul into our field of perception. And finally, the problem of duality is the problem of existence itself. First of all, duality is so intrinsic to every aspect of our daily life that it not only doesn't occur to us as a problem, it usually doesn't occur to us at all, except when through meditation or deep contemplation or sudden revelation, we realize something of the nature of the great illusion. Then we may get a glimpse of the fact that consciousness is split into knower and known, subject and object, spirit and matter. This split is not merely psychological, it is existential, meaning that it is the very condition of manifested life. Only then does the quote unquote problem emerge. How do we heal this split so that the apparent separateness resolves itself into unity? And finally, and cannot be solved by the man who refuses to recognize the possibility of two occult facts. The first of these being that the entire solar system embodies the consciousness of an entity who originates on planes entirely outside the solar ring past naught. So the entity is the solar logos. The solar ring past naught is the cosmic physical plane. The origin of the solar logos is the cosmic monadic plane, just as the origin of a human being is on the systemic monadic plane. But what's the connection between solving the problem of duality and recognizing the fact that, quote, the entire solar system embodies the consciousness of an entity who originates on planes entirely beyond the solar ring past naught? Why are these two tied together? If someone rejects the idea of a unifying source beyond our solar system, their understanding is inherently limited by duality. In other words, they have no framework by which to recognize anything that exists beyond duality, by those myriad pairs of opposites that can be observed within the manifested world. This dualism can only be resolved when viewed from a perspective that reveals both aspects of a given duality as parts of one reality. Without recognizing an origin beyond the ring past knot, that higher view will always be missing, and the conflict remains unsolvable. That doesn't mean that you can gain the level of consciousness uh, of that unified field that represents the source of our solar logos. I mean, nobody on this planet has pierced into that kind of a space, but just knowing that exists is the first step in understanding this idea of duality. At least that's one of the points. Okay, next up we have the second point. Can we get a reader, please?
Irina, do you want to read? Helio?
Yes. Okay, where do we start here?
That manifestation.
Yes, I see. That manifestation is periodical, and that the law of rebirth is the method that evolution takes in dealing with a man, a planetary logos and solar logos. Hence, the emphasis laid in the proem of the secret doctrine on three fundamentals: A, boundless immutable principle, and B, the periodicity of the universe. C, the identity of all souls with the oversoul. When scientists recognize these two facts, then their explanations will take a different line, and the truth, as it is, will begin to eliminate their reason. Few men are yet ready for illumination, which is simply the light of the intuition breaking through the barriers that the rational faculty has erected.
Thank you, Irene.
Thank you.
Okay, first, the problem of duality is the problem of existence itself and cannot be solved by the man who refuses to recognize the possibility that, two, manifestation is periodical, and that the law of rebirth is the method that evolution takes in dealing with a man, a planetary logos, and a solar logos. So again, we might ask, what's the connection between solving the problem of duality and the fact that the law of rebirth is the method of evolution at all levels of existence? Well, one thing we can say for sure, solving the problem of duality cannot be done through intellectual reflection, which is itself dualistic. Instead, it requires a growth in consciousness only available through repeated opportunities for the opposites to meet, clash, and eventually merge into a higher synthesis that comes through the law of rebirth. Without recognizing rebirth, one sees duality as a fixed, insoluble paradox. With the recognition of rebirth, duality is eventually understood to be a dynamic tension, gradually resolved through cycles of manifestation. See, when we resolve a pair of opposites, we often find that the resolved point is one of a pair of new opposites. And this comes through expansion of consciousness, this awareness, right? And it's this seeming endless series of fusions, of synthesis of pairs, only to find that that synthesis is one of a new pair, right? And of course, this can't be done in a lifetime or with the intellect, and hence the need for the reincarnation. Okay, so these two presented facts work together to provide a method for overcoming duality. The first establishes that all existence is unified in the consciousness of the solar logos, while the second fact shows that this unity expresses itself through cyclic manifestation and rebirth. Taken together, they reveal both the underlying unity behind apparent separativeness, as well as the rhythmic process by which that unity can and will progressively be realized. The key word here is progressively realized, right? Final synthetic unity would be in the purview of, well, even for someone such a being as the solar logos, it would be a relative experience of unity of the pairs of opposites. As long as there's a manifested universe, the uh, uh, primary reality is duality, informed by a hidden source of unity. Any thoughts or questions? Let me look at the chat here. Okay. Yeah, from Tia, who says, quoting the Bhagavad Gita, says, "My unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them." Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9. Yeah, this is, I know another quote, which is much more, I think, well known, which is that having pervaded the universe with a fragment of myself, I remain. And the fragment then would be that spark within every manifested entity. This is a little different, takes a little more pondering. Yes, Tia?
If you come at it from a perspective also that the monad, which is unmanifest or part of the cosmos, embodies in form, which is a localized um, experience. Moving back to cosmology, it makes sense that the unmanifest, though part of it can enter into that realm, it in of itself is too much of a container or too great a consciousness with no ring past not to do so. So it's the paradox that exists between the two, and I think that's one of the things that Master DK is trying to talk about.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Tia. Okay. I saw another hand shoot up and then go away. Yes, go ahead, Irene.
Thank you. I really, first time uncovering this phrase that you just really struck me, gradual cycle of manifestation. The question is it that process, gradual cycle of manifestation, is the mechanism of evolution? And from this question is that another question, are these three entities or let's say three like a man, it's a one let's say entity, planetary logos entity and solar logos, all the three of them going through all this gradual cycle of manifestation, obviously, and then they need to go into another cycle, all of them. So with that means that the planetary logos and solar logos also have to undergo the full restructuring or the full annihilation and get again new life, or is that a part of the cycles that we seeing, I mean, as a beginner, we seeing in the rounds or globes or that kind of scheme?
Well, the overall answer would be yes.
That's good. That's good. You'll rest my case then.
It really is. And this, through the section of TCF, DK is really emphasizing that as above, so below, right? That he tends to emphasize four levels, which is the cosmic, which is the solar logos, the planetary, which represents in our solar system the second aspect, humankind, which represents the third aspect, because he's fighting with the form, or is working with form, depending on. And then also often we'll mention at the atomic level. So that's four levels. There's many intermediate levels. It's because the grades of becoming are almost infinite. But he works within those, let's say, three levels, the three higher levels, ending with a human being, in order to establish how they all participate. For instance, they all have three fundamental principles: the monad, the second or soul aspect, and the manifested aspect, which for human beings is the personality aspect. DK even talks about the personality ray of a planet. So that's continuous. And also there's the sevenfold, which is represented by the seven planes, which contain the seven principles. And so these, at whatever level, and we can assume this continues on up to beings greater than the solar logos, also are septenary in their constitution, and that this is, and that is a further breaking out of the three fundamental aspects of monad, soul, and personality. Yes, Joe.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm being
one more statement. And therefore, the process of becoming is the same at every level. This form aspect is trying to unite with the soul, and that once united, that soul infused personality being seeks the monad and eventually unites with that. That's also true at all these higher levels. Okay, go ahead.
But would you say that the process of becoming is the process of evolution?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's two ways of looking at evolution. It starts the minute the universe begins. In other words, it includes the involutional phase, because it's all moving from that initial point until all returns to the one life, right? That's one way of looking at it. The other is a different use of the word, which is that you have the involutional arc, which takes one to the midway point, and then the evolutional arc, where one is responding to the soul aspect, which takes one all the way back to union with the one life.
Mm-hmm.
Two ways.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a long topic, so thank you very much.
Yeah, you went. Joe.
Let's say that, first of all, I'm really functioning from my intuitive side, but let's begin with the mental side. I'm struck with the fact that I, God, I matter, am. That's a statement we all use at least annually when we come to that Virgo, I think it is.
Yeah,
the other thing that I'm aware of is that how frequently we refer to the sun, S-U-N, and the son, S-O-N, in the same sentences. Okay, then I go into what really becomes intuitive. When we first read the material, I thought of the sky that I'm so intrigued with, and I saw a big platter, a big saucer of cream. And then I came to a lower level. There was another saucer of cream, and you keep coming down until we actually get into our own minds and recognize that there's a saucer of cream. We are the sons of God. That's basically all I
That's
wanted to say right now.
that's hilarious, Joe. It's like we're our evolutional selves are kitty cats that are moving up from one saucer of cream to the next greater saucer. Uh, uh, in fact, that analogy made me totally lose your first point. Tell me again what you said first. Can you?
Yes, I, God, I matter.
Yes.
Am.
Okay. Yeah, that's enough. Yeah, I got it from that. Uh, yeah, that's the esoteric keywords of the Virgo. Esoteric keywords from Virgo. I am the mother and the child. God, I matter, am. Uh, and so, in this is the state of being from the level of an atom all the way to the level of a solar logos. Anyone who is in incarnation, or for that matter, even in pralaya, out of incarnation, anyone who is participating in this universe can make that statement. You don't free yourself from matter, except for relatively, like when you die, you lose the physical body, but you still have, the other 6 C's of your constitution, right? So you are always, one way or another, involved in the form aspect, right? It's only a relative statement that one moves beyond matter. Okay, thank you, Joe. Not sure what to do with the dishes of cream, but it'll stay with me. Okay, anyone else? All right, so next, hence the emphasis laid in the proem of the Sacred Doctrine on the 3 fundamentals: A, the boundless immutable principle; B, the periodicity of the universe; and C, the identity of all souls with the oversoul. The word hence here suggests that it is these 3 fundamental tenets that provide the philosophical foundation for resolving duality. So let's take a closer look. DK introduces the idea of the first of these, the boundless immutable principle, on page 3 of a treatise on cosmic fire, where he says, there is one boundless immutable principle, one absolute reality, which antecedes all manifested conditioned being. It is beyond the range and reach of any human thought or expression. That, by the way, is this last sentence is why, all those disciplines that we looked at the beginning of this chapter come up short when they actually try to identify the nature of the source within their discipline, because it's beyond the range of any human thought or expression. 2 pages later, DK introduces the second fundamental postulate. Quote, there is a basic law called the law of periodicity. This law governs all manifestation, whether it is the manifestation of a solar logos through the medium of a solar system, or of a solar logos through or the manifestation of a human being through the medium of a form. This law controls likewise in all the kingdoms of nature. Then finally, we have the third postulate, which is that all souls are identical with the oversoul. Could we get a reader for this postulate?
Janet, you want to read?
All souls are identical with the Oversoul. 1. The logos of the solar system is the macrocosm. Man is microcosm. 2. Soul is an aspect of every form of life from a logos to an atom. 3. This relationship between all souls and the Oversoul constitutes the basis of the scientific belief in brotherhood. Excuse me. Brotherhood is a fact in nature, not an ideal. For the law of correspondences will explain the details of this relationship. The law of correspondences, or of analogy, is an interpretive law of the system and explains God to man. Five, just as man is a macrocosm for all the kingdoms of nature, so man is the macrocosm of all the subhuman kingdoms. 6, the goal of the evolution of the atom is self-consciousness, as exemplified in human kingdom. The goal of the evolution of man is group consciousness, as exemplified by the planetary logos. The goal of the planetary logos is God consciousness, as exemplified by the solar logos. The solar logos is the sum total of all states of consciousness within the solar system.
Thank you, Janet. Sounds like you got touched while you were reading this.
Yeah.
That's that. Go ahead.
I'm in Minnesota. And please, if you have the ability to send out light, love, and power to our state, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have to go.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Okay, so those are the three postulates as given by DK in TCF, in the very early pages of TCF. Next, when scientists recognize these two facts, then their explanation will take a different line, and the truth as it is will begin to illuminate their reason. This is another way of saying that scientists will become occultists, probably through the coming in of etheric vision and increased access to the intuition. By the way, it's two things because he lumps balanced mutable principle on the periodicity of the universe, and then the second thing is the identity of all souls with the oversoul. Anyway, the physicist David Boehm's concept of the implicate order is a great example of science taking a different line, wherein the quote, truth as it is will begin to illuminate their reason, DK's statement. And I think this is worth reading. Could we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Joe, you want to read?
Yeah, well, here, I'm finally here. Sorry.
No problem.
I'm very touched by Minnesota and Janet's comments. Yeah. Ultimately, the entire universe with all its particles, including those constituting human beings, their laboratories, observing instruments, etc., has to be understood as a single undivided whole in which analysis into separately and independently existent parts has no fundamental status.
Yes. Yeah, David Bohm. Yeah. So clearly, he's moving into the subjective side of physical science here. Just been a real light in that direction. Yes, Barbara.
Yes, so David Bohm proposes an implicate and an explicate order. That is very much in line with the Laya and Pralaya of the psychical existence. So I think that he also was able to conduct experiments in which the whole was refined down to a single particle, but still held its wholeness. So I think that he's made a scientific explanation of some of the basic principles, scientific. I think which makes it clear that from some points of view, they're very closely aligned.
Yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly. It was really a great light, and helped to break up that really obstinate, only that idea of the scientific method, which is so physical plane, and the prejudice that so many sciences have about reality equals physical plane measurability. So he really helped break that up. And I think there's a number of younger scientists who are following in his footsteps. Carol?
I just wanted clarification who the oversoul is.
Yeah, the oversoul, you could it's an identification with the cosmic Christ. It's the second aspect as an identity cosmically. You could say there's an oversoul, for the human kingdom and nature in which all human souls belong to. But you could take it higher than that and say that the soul of the universe is the interrelation comes about through the interrelation between spirit and matter. And that consciousness aspect that pervades all levels of being is the oversoul, of which each of our souls is a representative.
Okay,
Okay?
thanks.
Yeah. Tia.
I was going to say that kind of loops back into the discussion we had about light of the soul and the objective and the subjective, particularly with scientists, I think, because of the strong emphasis of the fifth ray. The brain itself has a different function, and it's much more of a separative, by its very nature of discernment, and a separative vehicle. But when we start getting into these subjective uh, ideas, which is cosmology and unmanifest and manifest, you're really getting into sort of the third initiation type of consciousness, in the sense that the brain has been so refined, which you talked about earlier, that it's a receptive vehicle being used by an abstract mind that's immeasurable, and that's been contacted through a more developing antakarana, which, science has not, who is still who is still needs to establish or work on the discovery of the soul, is unable to tap in, because it would be an objective fact for them. So um, it's difficult, because we are talking about something that is unmanifest, but our language, our way of using our brain, our physical equipment is all part of manifestation. And so, as long as we keep that in mind as this duality, what our limitations are, and the ultimate paradox and futility even of this inquiry. I
Yeah.
think it's a good way of having a right sense of proportion.
Yeah, well said, Tia. Yeah, in this fifth root race, the brain is at the pinnacle of engaging with the environment, with our environment, with the not self, right? We're really figuring out all aspects of the not self. I mean, look at science over the last, 150 years. It's just been extraordinary in terms of its exploration of the not self, right? So that's a function of this subrace, this fifth subrace of the fifth root race. But once we can align the mind, our mental sheath, with the soul, which will happen much more frequently in the sixth subrace of this fifth root race, the abstraction of soul connection will be able to impact the brain. The physiology will literally change. For six subrace types, will change in such a way that it can receive impressions. Of course, that goes hand in hand with the evolution of those who will incarnate into those bodies that will have this facility, right? And then we'll see a real renaissance in terms of soul awareness. Etheric vision will open up, the clairaudience, clairvoyance will become much more commonplace. People will see the energy fields and that type of thing. And this is not so far away, yeah, because we're really stuck in fiveness now, in this quality of developing the lower aspects of the monastic principle, which is exactly what we're supposed to be. It's only the leading group in the race that is able to move beyond that. And that's what initiation is all about. Okay. So, okay. Next, or finally, few men are yet ready for illumination, which is simply the light of the intuition breaking through the barriers that the rational faculty has erected. That's what I was just talking about. TK is here telling us that our habitual thought forms prevent us from seeing reality as it is. It is for this reason that the mind is the slayer of the real. Let's take a look at what MDR has to say on this subject. Reader, please. Before we get to that, yes, Irene, what do you have?
I just want to read.
Oh, please do.
Thank you. It's honored to read from MDR. So
Thank you.
Just one thing is, Carol, did you have a question before we go on to the next?
I forgot my hand up. Didn't notice. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Irene.
Thank you. The rational faculty is largely linear and monodirectional. It is as if we have to replace this linearity with what we might call sphericity of thought, a type of thinking which is thinking in all directions simultaneously. We might call this the overcoming of time in process of thought. Intuition dissolves the rigid corridors of the mind. Intuition supplies the unexpected and renders it visibly everywhere. Intuition floods and overwhelms the rational mechanism. but only after that mechanism has been well developed. MDR's commentary on TCF.
Thank you, Irene. Yeah, Michael at his best. I love this idea of a sphericity of thought, to overcome linearity. Okay. Finally, the footnote referenced by the phrase "the three fundamentals" introduces these fundamentals in the proem of the Secret Doctrine. Don't worry, we're not going to read all this. Actually, HPB develops these postulates quite a bit more than DK does, which is maybe why he felt that he didn't need to restate everything that she had done. For example, this passage, representing just a small sample of what HPB has to say on the, quote, boundless immutable principle. Could we get a reader, please?
Kirsten, do you want to read?
This infinite and eternal cause, dimly formulated in the unconscious and unknowable of current European philosophy, is the rootless root of all that was, is, or ever shall be. It is the cause devoid of all attributes and is essentially without any relation to manifested finite being. It is beingness rather than being, in Sanskrit sat, and is beyond all thought or speculation. This beingness is symbolized in the Secret Doctrine under two aspects. On the one hand, absolute abstract space representing bare subjectivity, the one thing which no human mind can either exclude from any conception or conceive of by itself. On the other, absolute abstract motion representing unconditioned consciousness.
Thank you. This is really worth pondering. If you have access to the Secret Doctrine, or you could just download the recording of this TCF session and take a longer look at this. This really is some of the core material in the Secret Doctrine. Okay, next up, could we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Nadell, you want to read? Or Marianne?
The duality of the solar system will eventually be recognized as dependent upon the following factors. A, existence itself. B, time and space. C, the quality of desire or necessity. D, the acquisitive faculty inherent in life itself. This faculty, by the means of motion, gathers to itself the material whereby it achieves its desire, whereby it fabricates the form through which expression is sought, and whereby it confines itself within the prison of the sheet in order to gain experience.
Thank you, Marianne. Okay, first, the duality of the solar system will eventually be recognized as dependent upon the following factors. A, existence itself. To exist in this manifested universe is to be dual. We are all beingness, as described by HPB in this excerpt, which is the essential noumenal or causal life, imprisoned within the form through which consciousness is currently evolving. Existence means differentiation. The one must express itself through the many, and this active expression immediately creates the polarity of spirit and form. Next, the duality of the solar system will eventually be recognized as dependent upon B, time and space. Time and space are not absolutes, but are conditioning agencies of manifestation. Time introduces sequence, change, and the perception of past, present, and future. Space introduces extension, separation, and the perception of here and there, and thus of subject and object. Together, they create the framework that makes relational activity and thus duality possible. Next, the duality of the solar system will eventually be recognized as dependent upon C, the quality of desire or necessity. Decay is not here talking about desire and necessity as psychological states, but as one of the cosmic forces that maintain duality. Here, desire represents the magnetic pull of consciousness towards experience, and necessity represents the drive of evolution. Together, they represent both the force and the motive that sustains duality. Spirit seeks matter through desire, also called the will to be, and matter must respond to spirit through evolutionary cycles of necessity. And finally, the duality of the solar system will eventually be recognized and dependent upon D, the acquisitive faculty inherent in life itself. This faculty, by the means of motion, gathers to itself the material whereby it achieves its desire, whereby it fabricates the form through which expression is sought, and whereby it confines itself within the prison of the sheath in order to gain experience. So the acquisitive faculty is the cosmic principle of attraction, which is both the motive and the means by which the indweller seeks form. Through vibration, circulation, and movement, spirit draws matter into patterns. This produces form-building activity. Atoms combine, bodies are constructed, vehicles are fabricated. So we have three principles working together. Desire compels life to seek form. The evolutionary drive, here called necessity, ensures that form will be built. And acquisitiveness gathers the material to make this building process actually happen. Okay? Any thoughts or questions? Okay, next up, reader, please.
Lisa, you want to read?
Sure, thank you. The supposition is correct that this theory takes for granted a mighty intelligence who works thus through an ordered plan and who consciously takes shape and incarnates in order to carry out specific purposes of his own. But this hypothesis is but the rock bottom fact underlying the Eastern teaching and is one that is largely accepted, though diversely expressed and viewed by thinkers of all schools of thought throughout the globe. Even this conception is but a partial presentation of the real idea. but owing to the limitations of man at this stage of evolution, it is sufficient as a working basis on which he may erect his temple of truth.
Thank you, Lisa. First, the supposition is correct that this theory takes for granted a mighty intelligence who works thus through an ordered plan and who consciously takes shape and incarnates in order to carry out specific purposes of his own. So behind the duality and ordered processes of the solar system lies the conscious directing intelligence of the SON aspect of the solar logos, who employs an ordered plan, which is his blueprint of evolution. This great plan uses the qualities listed in this passage, resulting in a progressive unfolding of consciousness through cycles of duality, time, space, desire, necessity, and the acquisitive faculty. Next. But this hypothesis is but the rock bottom fact underlying the Eastern teaching, and is one that is largely accepted, though diversely expressed and viewed by thinkers of all schools of thought throughout the globe. So in Eastern philosophy, the universe is universally understood as a manifestation of some divine intelligence. For example, in Hinduism, the ultimate reality known as Brahman is understood to manifest through Ishvara, the cosmic Lord who shapes and sustains the universe. In Buddhism, the same principle is expressed as the Dharmakaya, the cosmic body of truth, which embodies the boundless, formless essence of enlightenment. In Vedanta, the one life reveals itself through Maya, the veil of illusion, creating the appearance of multiplicity while remaining eternally unified at its core. Okay, finally, even this conception is but a partial presentation of the real idea, but owing to the limitation of man's at this stage of evolution, it is sufficient as a working basis on which he may erect his temple of truth. This suggests that the conception of the solar system as the incarnation of a mighty intelligence is not the whole truth, but because the actual quality of the consciousness of the solar logos is far beyond the grasp of even advanced initiates, it is, quote, sufficient as a working basis on which we may erect our temple of truth. Okay? Okay, up next, reader, please.
Scott, do you want to read?
Yes. This entity, whom we call the Solar Logos, is in no sense the same as the personal God of the Christian, who is no more nor less than man himself, expanded into a being of awful power and subject to the virtues and vices of man himself. The Solar Logos is more than man, for he is the sum total of all the evolutions within the entire solar system, including the human, which is an evolution standing at a middle point in relation to the other evolutions. On one side of him are ranged hosts of beings who are more than human, and who in past kalpas reached and passed the stage where man is now. On the other side are hosts of the subhuman evolutions, who in future kalpas will achieve the stage of humanity. Man stands midway between the two and is at the point of balance. Herein lies his problem.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, first, this entity, whom we call the Solar Logos, is in no sense the same as the personal God of the Christian, who is no more nor less than man himself, expanded into a being of awful power and subject to the virtues and vices of man himself. This is more like something HPB would write. This teaching may seem obvious to everyone here, but just think how many people still labor under the idea that God is a, quote, being of awful power and subject to the virtues and vices of man and self. You know, the idea that you can anger God, for instance, you know. For those who believe in this type of God, religion becomes fear-based and authoritarian. It sanctifies righteous anger, favoritism, vengeance, and thus justifies racism and violence. But worst of all, instead of lifting believers toward higher intelligence and loving purpose, it aggrandizes the personality and thus traps consciousness in its own shadow, thereby stalling spiritual growth. But when God is conceived not as a magnified human being, but as a cosmic intelligence, one's spiritual convictions and understanding become a path of liberation, no matter which particular method one is using. Okay, how are we doing? We're almost to the end here. The solar logos is more than man, for he is the sum total of all the evolutions within the entire solar system, including the human, which is an evolution standing at a middle point in relation to the other evolutions. Again, we're reminded that the great heavenly man is a being inclusive of many orders of life, from the lowest materially bound lives up to and including those whose stature is approaching that of a solar logos. We see in this chart of the 7 hierarchies of our solar logos that the human hierarchy is at the midway point and thus stands in a place of receptivity to the 3 above and of distribution to the 3 below. Next. Oops. Oh yeah, here's the 3 above. What's going on here? Well, I'll figure it out. We'll pick it up next time. Yeah. Well, I take it back. I'd like to get to the end of this passage. On the one side of him are arranged hosts of beings who are more than human and who in past kalpas reached and passed the stage where man now is. Such beings include the solar angels, the informing lives of kingdoms of nature, globe lords, chain lords, scheme lords, and members of the Deva evolution of development higher than man, such as the Raja Deva lords of planes and lords of subplanes. These ranged, here they are, these ranged hosts can be found in the highest 3 hierarchies. For example, DK tells us that the second hierarchy, quote, entered through the second ventricle within the sacred heart and are the prototypes of the monads. They are the source of monadic life, but they are not the monads. They are far higher. Next, on the other side are hosts of the subhuman evolutions, who in future kalpas will achieve the state of humanity. These include the animal, plant, and mineral kingdoms, but also the myriads of lesser lives that make up the form world, which can be found in the 6th and 7th hierarchies. And yeah, we'll stop right there. We'll pick up with this description of these lower hierarchies next time. So thank you all for coming today. Much appreciated.